Hello.
Hello.
Roman says hi too. Where are you sitting, Nora? Next to me?
Right here?
Okay. Today, come on over. Scooch over. Today we're reading Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Can we start while we were?
No. By Judy Barrett. Drawn by Ron Barrett. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat. And Grandpa was doing the flipping.
Which one is the mom? Is that the mom?
Yes, that's the mom. She's squeezing oranges.
It looks like a boy.
Seconds later, something flew through the air and headed toward the kitchen ceiling and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was
Why does he have one eye? Why did he?
Nora,
Why did he do that?
because it's covering his face. After we realized the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across the ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay a tiny town of Chew and Swallow.
You forgot to turn the page on the next one. Mommy, you forgot to turn the page on the next one.
In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, and about 300 people, some assorted cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied them with all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was the weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served was what they ate, but it never rained rain, and it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice, and it snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. It's my kind of town. Would you like that?
No.
No? You wouldn't like food to fall from the sky? No?
I want you to meet.
Oh, okay. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins all with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in the refrigerators in case they got hungry in between meals. Clever, clever. What could go wrong, right? The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, the breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny side up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter.
Who is that?
I don't know, just some guy in the town. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters, already in their rolls, frankfurters are hot dogs, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby, and when the wind shifted to the east, it brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup, periods of peas and baked potatoes, followed by gradual clearing with wonderful jello setting in at the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned up after every meal and fed them to the cats and dogs. And they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish, turtles, and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so the soil would be richer for the people's flower gardens. Clever, clever.
Why do you say clever, man?
Because they know how to clean it up. So what do you think's going to go wrong? Don't tell everyone because you watched this
Why
video
did
last
you
night.
say
I don't know. Well, let's find out. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day there was only broccoli all overcooked. And the next day there were Brussels sprouts with peanut butter and mayonnaise. Another day there was pea soup fog, and no one could see where they were going, and they all could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. Oh boy.
Why is she doing that?
Because I think Brussels sprouts with peanut butter and mayonnaise would be disgusting and make you make that face. Maybe not. I've never tried it, but I'm speculating. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions, and the people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread rolls all day long into the night, and there were soft rolls and hard rolls, and some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast, and most of it was larger than they had ever seen before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, and they had to close school. How terrible. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick and ended the day with a stomach ache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. Oh no. This doesn't sound so great after all, huh? The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses were badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there were no more school for children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival.
Is that Chew and Swallow?
The whole town is called Chew and Swallow. Like our town is called Moon, this is called Chew and Swallow. The people glued together giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style with peanut butter, took absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for a new land. Sorry. I know, can you believe it, Roman? It's crazy. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached the small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find new places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves and packaged in boxes and bottles and cans. Meat had to be cooked, and it was kept in refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got hit by a hamburger again, and nobody dared go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside of our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. The end. All right, we'll be back with our activity.
Yep, as soon as we go for the fire. Oops, my first is a little coffee.
Okay, can you stop the video?
Yep. Bye, have a good day at your houses.